All right, mics are unmuted, and I'm ready when you are.
Okay, we will call the meeting to order. It is 7:22, and on the agenda, we have public comments. No public comments. And item 3A, PC 19008, HR 18-15, Historic Review Board review of a reduction in the size of a landmark property at 16430 Hiram Avenue. For this, do we need the reading of the whole thing?
Even if there's
All right. Yeah,
there may be people watching on TV.
Oh,
true.
All the
We've got to speak to our television audience. So this is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. We have one public hearing on land use application scheduled for tonight. A staff report has been prepared and has been made available to the public 7 days before this first public hearing. The staff identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial procedure that the commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. And the hearing procedure is shown on the chart on the wall. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and give it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which your card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city can notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. A person may submit any written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written material received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the city record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, oversized poster boards, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the public record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised for consideration of the City Commission or LUBA or both, without raising the issue on the record with sufficient specificity and accompanied by statements and evidence that the city and all parties can respond. The issue will be not deemed appealable to the State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of any applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So, regarding 16430 Hiram Avenue. Have the other board members present visited the site?
I've not.
Okay, I have. Does anyone have a conflict of interest or ex parte?
No.
I will state for the record that I am a real estate broker licensed in Oregon, and as such, people pay me to help with the purchase and sale of residential property. I have had no involvement of any kind with this particular property. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the commissioners about these disclosures? In that case, we'll proceed with the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Chair Basinger. We have a request for a reduction in the size of a landmark property at 16430 Hiram Avenue. This is in the Park Place neighborhood. It's a landmark outside of a district. So the property is on the corner of Hiram and Rock Street. Park Place has a handful of historic properties, but it is not a historic district. And this property is about 50 feet wide along Hiram by a little over 300 feet in length, I believe. The house was built just before 1900, and it doesn't have a name like many of the historic homes do. It's just kind of the address, and it's a vernacular home. 2 years ago, this property actually came before the board for renovation to the home. Essentially, it was in pretty bad shape, and I think it was almost rebuilt, is my understanding, with the same footprint and same design, or very similar design. And then the detached garage was added as well 2 years ago, approved by Historic Review Board. There's a detached garage, there's an old garage on the property that was approved for demolition at that time by the board, but it actually hasn't been demolished yet. So this is the view from Hiram Avenue. And then if you go down on Rock Street's really more of an alley. And then that's the old garage which was approved for demolition. And then you can see on the left a bit of the new garage building. And then behind the old garage is an old apple tree. And you can kind of see just the rest of the property there. And so the property owner wants to partition the lot and develop the back half. They are not sure yet how many lots and exactly how that partition would go, because we have a set of code amendments that are going to the city that are before the city commission right now. They're under review. And those code amendments would, they change a lot of our housing development code, our residential development codes. And one possibility for this property is cottage housing or cluster housing. And if that were pursued, then there might be up to 4 additional, or I guess 3 additional homes. And if that were not pursued, then it would probably just be 1 lot in addition to the existing home. So until those code amendments are passed, until the owner does some more due diligence, the future configuration of the property and exactly where the new property lines are drawn is uncertain. So really what is being requested here is can the landmarks, can the historic landmark size be reduced so that the back half of the property could be developed? And then if so, are there some sideboards that we need to put on that reduction, or is there kind of a maximum, the smallest that we would be willing to go, that the board would be willing to approve for that historic property? And so if this were approved, then any future historic review would be limited to just the
Designated property.
decreased size lot, and the remainder of the property, the new homes that would go there would not come before the historic review boards. They would not have historic overlay on them. So I drew the applicant, shows a proposed lot line, but again, that setback from the garage is, up for debate, and could be, it depends on a lot of things. So I have a staff recommendation about maybe what it should be. And then these are neighboring historic structures. So the one on top is across the street. That's another local landmark. And then the one on the bottom is a block away on Front Avenue, I believe. And so those are the nearest historic structures. So, when we're looking at this request, we want to consider the impact on the resource, the historic property in question, but also are there other historic properties nearby that would be affected by it? So these are the ones nearby. So I'm going to go back to this photo. Staff really, I find that reducing the size of the landmark, moving that property line up closer, the backyard doesn't really have a whole lot of, doesn't add a whole lot to the historic character of this property. The inventory form does mention fruit trees, and it talks about multiple fruit trees. Again, there's only one apple tree left. Those other trees, I think, were removed potentially with the construction of the garage. But, fruit trees have a lifespan, and the last remaining tree looks like it's not in the best shape. And so, I think losing that would also not affect the property. Now, what could potentially have an impact on the house is new construction. If it were fairly close and tall, so that you could see it, when looking at this house, if you can see a big, new house towering over behind that, I think that could potentially have an impact.
Behind it on the other side.
I'm sorry?
Like the ones on the other side, in that picture right there.
Oh,
Down the alleyway.
Down the
right.
alley.
So this is in the R6 zone. So 6,000 square feet would be the lot size, but lot sizes within the area range from less than 5,000, like the homes that you see on the right that are on Rock Street. Those are 4,800 square foot lots. So there were lots of record. And then some lots are 10,000 square feet, just down the street or next door. So there's a big range in the property sizes in the area. So I don't see any issue with reducing the size below 6,000, because there's a pattern of that, and the development pattern in Park Place is very irregular to begin with. What I would be concerned about is in all of our residential zones, the maximum height is 35 feet or 2.5 stories, and the minimum setbacks in the underlying zone for the new garage is 3 feet to the property line, and then for a side setback if a new house were built behind it, a side setback would be 5 feet. So you know, with the underlying zoning, you could have a 35-foot tall structure 8 feet away from that garage. And I think while it's unlikely that something that large would be built there, I think I'm recommending conditions of approval to further separate new construction from the existing home so that we don't have an impact of such a tall structure behind it. So that is why I have recommended conditions. I'm actually going to talk about the second one first. So a minimum of 25 feet between the back of the new garage and any new structures that are taller than the existing historic structure. So the existing historic structure is 13. I think in the staff report I have 13 feet 9 inches. So if any new buildings on that lot were taller than that, then that setback has to be 25 feet. If they are, 13.8 I have here. It's 13.8 or shorter, then, you know, that minimum 8-foot setback would apply. So there are a few ways that this can be accomplished. You can require the property line be drawn a minimum of 22 feet from the back of the new garage. You can have an easement recorded on any new properties, or a deed restriction on the new properties. So, you know, we can talk about the options there, or you can choose to approve it with those options, and then the applicant can choose what's most appropriate for them.
Oh, list all of them and then they can choose from
You know,
those.
that's an option. But there, you know, drawing the property line 22 feet away, it is different from, you know, the easement. So, you know, that would preclude any buildings at all on a new lot, you know, even if they were shorter, that would preclude that. The first condition is for screening or buffering with landscaping. And so kind of protecting the yard and the landscape around that existing landmark with some screening trees from any new development. And so just to ensure that the trees will actually accomplish that, I would suggest at least 3 fruit trees, at least 2 large deciduous trees, or any mix of, you know, coniferous or deciduous trees that would provide equivalent screening of, you know, 2 large deciduous trees. And then the other two there are other 2 conditions of approval, but those essentially say that if the partition never goes through, then this landmark reduction won't happen. So it is contingent upon a future partition. I think that covers everything. You have any questions?
I have no questions.
And I think it'd be, with the size of that house, even though there's larger houses, you know, across the street from it, if they did little tiny houses, that would be,
Are you going into deliberations?
no, I'm just, you know, we're talking about scale and stuff, so.
Yes. Okay. Do we have any public comment? In the absence of public comment. Oh, a question.
You come up?
You have to come up.
Rob Beislein, these conditions, how does that go with the county as platting property? Because won't the county have platted the property to certain expectations before somebody buys the property? Do they have to get involved? I think we're running that problem in Kenema right now. The county wants, I think, Mr. Green to replat his property, even though it hasn't been required in the past. So how would that affect that?
Right, so the partition would be approved by the city, and then it would be platted through the county. And then if that partition never happened, then this approved landmark reduction wouldn't happen either. So it's not a replat, it's just a plat.
If they
It's
divide
just
it
the
up,
first
lot
plat.
if you look at the
adjustment.
lots, it looks like
Yeah.
to me there's 50 by 300, you can get 4 lots out of that. 100 square.
Well, yeah, I mean, it
each.
depends on,
Be 3 different lots.
How big they are and stuff.
right,
So
so,
with these conditions, how do you plot something ahead of them when you don't know what they're gonna build?
right, so the second condition, would apply, essentially, it requires city staff to be on top of when the partition application comes in, then we have to pull this historic review approval and say, hey, this is part of the requirements of your partition. So there's nothing that would be recorded on the property before a partition. It would be part of the partition plat. Like it would come with this easement, deed restriction, or, with the first bullet, it would just, dictate where that line goes. But yeah, I mean, it does require city staff to kind of make sure that this is followed through when a partition application comes in.
Okay, that's my only question.
Yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is that the property owner intends to develop it himself, not
Okay.
sell it for someone else to deal with. But of course, circumstances could change. But that's the way I read the application.
And actually, I will add, because I just checked my email to see if I had anything from the applicant about attending tonight. And she actually had sent me, when I sent out the agenda, she responded, and I will add this to the record as an attachment or as an exhibit to the staff report. But she said, that sounds great regarding the buffer. See you on the 22nd. So we have from the applicant that this buffer condition, it sounds like the applicant is amenable. So I think it's appropriate for me to put that email into the public record, considering that the applicant didn't attend tonight. And I think it's important that you guys know that
She's
as
okay.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, good, thank you. In the absence of further public testimony, then, we'll close the public hearing and move on to deliberation. Who wants to start?
It's
I
pretty
think it's Ray's turn to
straightforward.
start.
Huh?
I think
It's pretty
it's pretty straightforward.
I think it's pretty straightforward as well.
I move that we approve, or are we,
We can do
is
that.
this, we could
You approve of
approve it with the
conditions.
conditions, right,
Yeah.
dependent on what. So I approve HR
1815.
1815, I knew it was in the teens, 1815 with the recommended conditions of approval.
And I will second.
All right. Been moved and seconded. Will you please poll the board?
Well, how do we do the order for this one? Board Member Stobie,
Yes.
Board Member Met,
Aye.
and Chair Basinger.
Aye.
All right.
The proposal is approved. And the last item on the agenda for tonight is communications. Do you have anything to communicate?
I do, a couple things. So I've got, and I want to give you something. When Claire and I went to the preservation, the certified local government workshop, we got heritage card decks.
All right.
And I have more. And
You
so-
got a ton more.
Yeah, so we're gonna use them as like door prizes or something, giveaways during Preservation Month.
Oh, that's cool.
For our programs.
hang on
Or
to
should we have a
some
few
for
for
the,
chamber?
the downtown event
Right.
Excuse me.
for city
Oh, that'd
celebration.
be cool. Because we got, what,
I have at least a dozen. Yeah.
still?
Yeah.
It seemed like they were like giving them away in boxes.
I have a whole box.
Take them.
So there is the Oregon Heritage Summit, April 25th to 26th. It's actually noon to noon, on a Thursday and Friday, I think, in Medford. And if any of the board members want to attend that, we can use our CLG grant funding to pay for that. So it will cover the registration and travel costs, travel expenses. I'll be attending it. And if anyone is interested, let me know and we can get registered for that. Here's a
So it's the 26th and 27th.
25th and 26th.
Oh, Thursday, Friday, okay.
And then lastly, I've got an update on the Willamette Falls Legacy project for you.
Cool.
Did the sale go through?
Oh, no, not yet, not yet. I think that's all still in the works, but the project partners, which are Metro, Clackamas County, Oregon City, and the state, are moving forward with Riverwalk Phase 1, and they put out a request for proposals in the fall for a team, engineering and design team, to basically do the construction drawings for the Phase 1 of the Riverwalk. And they have an intent to award that contract out, and so they're working on getting that all finalized. So they've got a team on board, or they issued the intent to award. I believe it's Jacobs. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of them, but Jacobs something. Sorry, I had an email that I meant to bring with the name of them and I didn't bring it. But that design and engineering team will be working on the construction drawings for Phase 1 and the permitting for that. And then the expected construction beginning date, I think, is still 2020 for the
Spring.
Riverwalk. With that, I want to remind the board that the mill site doesn't have any locally designated structures. There are many structures that are potentially eligible, but none of them are nationally listed or locally listed. So none of the, if a building is demolished to, make way for the Riverwalk, that won't come to the board for review. That'll just be a demolition permit. But there is a condition of approval for the master plan that was approved for the site that does require an intensive level survey for any potentially eligible buildings to be done before any building is modified, or for any other buildings, like there are lots of 1960s era buildings out there, a reconnaissance survey. So taking photos and kind of documenting those buildings. So that's going to be done before any of those buildings are altered or demolished. But Historic Review Board approval is not required for those. So you won't see them come to you. It most likely will be, the Planning Commission has certain purview over the design, the master plan, and then some of it is at the level where it would just be reviewed by staff through land use for site plan design review. But of course, how much public process went into the whole, Riverwalk design and the vision for that. So it's not like we're not doing our public community engagement. But yeah, no board approval or no board review for that. And that's all I've got.
But within the master plan or the plan as it is as of right now, they have definitely designated which buildings they're planning on saving or redoing.
Right, so the master plan included 5 buildings identified for retention.
Restoration.
Restoration, yeah, reuse in some way. And, but the future use of those wasn't specified, so it could be private use, private development, or part of the Riverwalk.
But they wouldn't be taken down though, at this point.
No, so for those, if those were, if something happened and it turned out that one of those buildings was going to need to be
Like
demolished or
structurally
something,
or whatever.
then that would have to go back to the planning commission because that was a condition of approval for the master plan. So if they want to revise that condition of approval, then it's a planning commission public hearing, but still not historic review board.
Even the older ones and some of the other like the wall, the old mill wall,
Right. Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
call it,
Because there's no historic district and there are no locally listed buildings, locally designated.
and there's no interest in that.
Well, not from, it's privately owned.
Right.
So, the public has an easement on it for the Riverwalk,
Yeah.
but the whole property is privately owned and owner consent is required, for a local designation. So not to say that it won't ever be, none of those buildings will ever be, but for right now, I think it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to the owner to do that.
Or tie their hand. But at least there's that intent within the master plan to retain and reuse those buildings.
Right,
Okay.
right.
All right. I think in that case, we can call the meeting adjourned.
Okay.
Yeah.